on civil liberties with an overview and analysis of the Bill of Rights. You guys should all know from our discussion of the Constitution that the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They were created as almost as a compromise and a promise to the anti-federalists who were scared the Constitution was going to create this crazy powerful national government that disregarded the rights of the people. So the Bill of Rights was the promise to those anti-federalists to make sure that the people are protected. So the first 10 amendments established clear limitations purely for the national government. So I want to point out here that we're talking just about limitations to the national government. Each individual Bill of Rights is actually, or an amendment is written and says that the national government shall not do, or Congress shall not do something. So this is protecting the people from the new national government created by the Constitution. The first 10 amendments were added into the Constitution in 1791, you can see here, and they're a very clear set of items that very clearly give people their rights. So by limiting the national government, you are empowering the people to be able to do something, and you're making it so Congress can't write laws to take away these rights. You guys probably are all familiar with the First Amendment. Hopefully you know the First Amendment has 5 essential freedoms. We'll go through those pretty quickly. You can see here in the next slide that the First Amendment is written in a way, and I want to point out, that says Congress shall make no laws right here. That's really important because it's just saying that Congress, meaning our national government, cannot make a law that does the next 5 things. One is they can't take away our freedom of speech. We should all know that our freedom of speech is something that obviously has limitations that has been determined throughout time, and we'll talk about those limitations for the next couple of weeks in the class. The next of the first 5 freedoms, or the next of the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment, is the Freedom of Religion Clause. This says, again, Congress shall make no law. And this is respecting the establishment of the religion or free exercise. And I want to point out the difference between establishment first, and I'll focus first on establishment. Let's see if we can just focus here. Establishment is the idea of creating, that Congress can't create or establish a religion. It also means that it can't stop us from creating our own religion. The next clause, the Free Exercise Clause, which we'll focus on right here, the Free Exercise Clause is one where Congress can't make a law that prevents our ability to practice religion. So if we're talking about something where Congress is preventing us from praying or celebrating a religious practice in a certain way, that would be free exercise. Preventing the actual establishment or the creation of religion, that's going to be an establishment issue. So a question you might be asking yourself is, well, separation of church and state, what does that mean? That means that Congress or our national government can't be entangled with, our government cannot be entangled with a church, meaning that's an establishment clause issue. So the establishment clause is what created separation of church and state, that government and churches cannot coincide together. So if you hear that issue of separation of church and state, you're going to remember, hopefully, that that's an establishment or created by the Establishment Clause, which is different than the Free Exercise Clause. So Congress shall not make a law with abridging free speech, respecting the religion. The third of the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment is Congress shall make no law violating freedom of press. This is, again, regarding to our media. Congress cannot prevent our media from reporting what's happening in our news the way they want to. This is newspaper, television, internet. This has grown over time. We talk about judicial activism and the changing and flexibility of the Constitution over time. Well, the press has been something that has changed over time. The 4th freedom in the First Amendment is assembly. Assembly means to gather or create a group. So you should realize that this freedom, hopefully, relates mainly to the practice of interest groups. Interest groups are allowed to come together, to assemble, and to say whatever they want to say. So the creating of the group is the assembly process. The ability to protest is peaceful protest is assembly as well. What they can say then would be kind of the use of this free speech clause of the First Amendment. And then finally, the First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law abridging the people the right to petition our government. So we have the ability to write a letter to our government or email or post somewhere or say out loud that we do not agree with what they are doing. Does this include threats? The answer is no. You are not allowed to petition the government with a threat, but you are allowed to peacefully say we disagree with this law that you are trying to pass. The Second Amendment is related to the right to bear arms, which we see, right here. And this is the right, obviously, for us to be able to defend ourselves with weapons. But I want to also point out that the Second Amendment creates the ability for states to have a well-regulated militia. And we mean by state governments here, the free state can create a well-regulated militia. So each state has the right to have that militia, and also people in that state have the right to have arms or weapons. The Third Amendment is not necessarily as relevant today as it's not an issue, but if you think about the reasons or the timing of when the Bill of Rights was passed, the Third Amendment is one where post the Revolutionary War, people were concerned with governments, specifically the national government, having a requirement that we house soldiers during time of war. And so this is actually telling us that no soldiers in time of peace or in time of war, I'll make this yellow so we can see it. So we see here peace, and we see or in time of war, that we can't be forced to house any of the troops. This is what is this called? This is actually called quartering, which you see, so I'll write the word quartering of soldiers down here, but you can see the word quartering or quarter is in the amendment. And by quartering here, we mean living quarters is what this is referring to. The Fourth Amendment, very, very important when it comes to our civil liberties. The Fourth Amendment allows us to be secure in our persons, houses, papers, and effects against, and here, really important, unreasonable searches and seizures. So the first thing that the Fourth Amendment tells us is that the government, if they're going to look at our stuff, have to have, they would classify or define as a reasonable search and seizure. The amendment itself defines what it means to be a reasonable search or seizure. Seizure means taking our stuff. Searching means looking at our stuff. So here, a search or a seizure that is reasonable is going to have what would be called probable cause. Probable cause is a link of a person to a crime. You are linked to a crime because there is some evidence to show that you have done something wrong. So in order for that search or seizure to be reasonable, the government must get a warrant, shall be issued, but the warrant will only be issued if there is probable cause for linking that person to a crime. So you can't have what's called reasonable suspicion to have your stuff searched. You've got to have what's called probable cause. There's different levels of, reasonable suspicion is not as concrete of evidence. I might be suspicious of you, but I have to have some physical evidence called probable cause to show that there is worth getting a warrant and then worth being searched or seized. You guys might be wondering, what about schools? People search us all the time at schools. One thing we're going to learn about in the next couple of weeks or the next week or so is that each of these amendments has limitations and has been interpreted differently based on the situation, the timing of the amendment. And the Fourth Amendment is one of them. Whereas in most situations, probable cause is required in schools. You can be searched or your stuff can be taken with what we would consider reasonable suspicion. So you don't need that direct link in a school. And that was decided by the Supreme Court. The Fifth Amendment has 5 freedoms. So another 5 kind of biggie here with the Fifth Amendment. Some of these are simple and easy to understand. Some of these I'll take some time to explain a little bit more. The Fifth Amendment says that no person shall be held to answer for a crime. So this is where you start to see the Fourth and Fifth Amendment actually is where you start to see us protecting people who are accused of crimes. The majority of the Bill of Rights protects people who are accused of crimes, starting with the Fourth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment continues that. The Fifth Amendment says first that we will not be held to answer for a crime unless there's an indictment of a grand jury. Well, what's a grand jury? A grand jury is a group of people, of your peers, a jury of people that decide, is there enough evidence to accuse? So very similar to impeachment in the House of Representatives, an indictment. Hopefully you mean that you remember that the word indictment here means formal accusation or formal accusal. And formally, we get accused of a crime by a grand jury. That grand jury evaluates the evidence to see, is there enough evidence to accuse a person of a crime? The next thing is double jeopardy. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. That is a Fifth Amendment protection. Self-incrimination, the right to remain silent, is also a Fifth Amendment protection. And I would say probably for our purposes, one of the most important things for us to remember to know about the Fifth Amendment is going to be this clause right here, the Due Process Clause. It shows up in two different amendments. Here, we are saying that the national government cannot deprive us of life, liberty, or property without due process. So here, the word liberty. Our freedoms cannot be taken away unless there is what we would be considered due process of law. And then finally, eminent domain. The national government cannot take our property without what they would call just compensation, meaning the value compensation, the fair value market price for our property, or without proving public use. So the question you're asking yourself is, how is this a protection? The national government can take our property, ? The answer is yes, but they have to prove that the property will be used for the public, and they have to pay you the fair market value. So if the government needs to create a new road that runs through your yard, they might be able to take your yard and your house if that road is going to be used for the public and if they are to pay you the value of your house that day. So that takes us all the way through the first 5 amendments. The next video will take you through Amendments 6 through 10.